What's going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here today with another comic analysis. This one's a bit of a challenge, but in the best of ways because we have Alan Moore's Watchmen. So, Watchmen is a really complex yet intricate story. It went for 12 issues, and it has a sense of realism that I think is difficult to convey, but if you can try to convey it in a way that is not just political but grassroots, I think you can get to your destination because there is a lot going on in the narrative, but at the same time you can look at the story for what it is. Obviously there's a superhero element to it, but there's also real world issues at play. And what Alan Moore does is he balances both because you have characters in the Watchmen that are basically superhuman, and they're really non-human, like Dr. Manhattan. And then you have very human characters like, Night Owl and even Rorschach. So you get a really fine balance in between. And I'm going to go over some stuff today. I'm probably not going to get to all of it because I might need to make a part two of this just because The Watchmen is so dense. But there are quite a few points that I would like to get to. So I want to start with Adrian Veidt. And this portrayal is very unique. It's very unique for many reasons. And I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler free as I can. Unfortunately, I have to spoil some things, but I don't want to do too much textual analysis because I think you should read the story for yourself. Instead, I want to give you some more background on character work that Alan Moore is working with here. So with Veidt, which I believe I'm pronouncing right because it is German, he's basically the reason why this whole story is happening. So you have the United States and Russia; they are going at it, and this is during wartime, obviously. So the U.S. and Russia at this time do not have a very good relationship, and they're going to probably end up going to war. And from what you get, you have a new tragedy. So Veidt basically orchestrates a tragedy that has to make the United States and Russia coexist, for lack of a better term. Not that they're allies, but they have to put their stuff on pause and address what is going on now. So this causes Dr. Manhattan to kind of disconnect from humanity because Dr. Manhattan was a human at one time, but now he acts more non-human than ever, and he's very disconnected. He's still emotional. He still has a lot of cognitivity, and he's as smart as ever, but he's distancing himself, and you can see this through his relationship with Lori, who ends up going away. And she becomes a second Silk Spectre. And I know there's this debate between Miss Jupiter and Silk Spectre, but that's not really up for me to debate, so call her either or, I guess. However, their relationship takes a strain because of this, because non-human issues are making a human issue one of the biggest issues in the entire story throughout this relationship gone wrong. Even though there is a lot of reconciliation, this shows how things beyond our control are going to hinder us going forward. And even war, for example, war is beyond most of our control. And that's what I think Alan Moore is trying to convey in the story too, is there's a lot of non-human things in the acts of war. And the average human being is the one that takes the brunt of it. There's also a really big theme of tragedy in this. So what Alan Moore does is he takes the black and white and he makes shades of gray, sorry. And shades of gray are really good in comics because you don't always want a stereotypical hero and you don't want a stereotypical villain. You want your characters to have range. And these characters do have a lot of range. Every single one of them does. I believe Veidt has the most range along with Rorschach, because Veidt is very intelligent, and he's the one that orchestrates all of this, right? So he has killed millions to try to preserve something else. However, do you look at human beings as numbers? because casualties are always counted as numbers. And what he has done has caused a lot of harm. But at the same time, he believes that he's doing it for the right reason, to get human beings to come together a bit more. But it's going to take death to pretty much get them to where they need to be. Because if you use the analogy of a funeral, when your loved one passes away, that's usually a time where everybody comes together, and not just bonds per se, but they come together to either celebrate someone's life or to mourn. And it's a very grim example, but I think it's an example that a lot of people can relate to. Unless if your family's really dysfunctional and they can't get along at a funeral, then that's pretty sad. Um, but but I believe this is what Veidt's intention was, and also he's a really unique character because he travels the world for reasons that are beyond comprehension, maybe even to himself, but he does it for Alexander the Great, who was basically his hero, and he almost goes through knightly trials in a lot of ways and self-trials. So I'll give you another instance. He was born into wealth, but his parents passed away when he was a teenager, and he didn't want their wealth because he truly believed that he didn't want people to say that he got success because of that fortune. Instead, he gave all that wealth away from charity and to charity, and he started from scratch and then built himself back up. He also is the one that murdered the comedian, and the comedian is one that was able to kind of tell the future and realize that there was going to be all this impending war and impending tragedy. However, the comedian's a tragic character in himself. He's one of the Watchmen. He's supposed to be a hero, but he does some very, very despicable things. So, give you an example of this. He sexually assaults the first Silk Spectre, who is Laurie's mother, and he's eventually stopped, but he ends up having a sense of guilt over all this. But then he ends up getting killed. So this shows how pretty much not everybody is what they seem. In life, in day-to-day life, you might be encountering people that you think are really good people and they're doing these really good things, but then behind the scenes they are doing very dastardly things that completely disqualify whatever good things they've done. So that's the comedian right there. And Rorschach, for example, is just trying to avenge this murder, and there's a lot of blind spots, but in a good way, where you can try to understand why you would want to avenge somebody, but also you have to understand the circumstances behind it, and maybe sometimes your characters don't even know those set circumstances. So that's where the story with the comedian gets very fuzzy, but in a very good way. This is called a hermeneutic irritant, and this is what Alan Moore gives us. And he gives us this so we can look at it from a shades of gray point of view and try to weigh out the pros and cons. And sometimes you don't always need a definitive answer to come to a conclusion. So that's what I take on the comedian. And there's a lot of good stuff in this story. I mean, I think when the comedian said too that savagery will eventually lead to global annihilation, he wasn't incorrect on that. He wasn't wrong. Yet he was the one that was, having the most physically disgusting form of savagery, for lack of a better term. So there's a sense of irony there too that I think Alan Moore is getting at with these characters. And Veidt is also a really good example of deception personified. He tries to unite the world against nuclear war, but he uses murder as a weapon. So again, shades of gray mentality. This is also a paradox and a juxtaposition, which I know I've said a lot in these analyses, but they really, really ring true in comics, because not every character needs to be one-dimensional. You want your characters to be multi-dimensional. And I believe that Veidt is one of those, as is Rorschach. But Rorschach is probably selfishly my favorite character, because you have the Rorschach masks, which are a pretty outdated way of assessing mental illness and schizophrenia. And each design in the mask shows a different image that the person is probably seeing, or at least telling their psychiatrist. So I thought the segments with Malcolm Long in the prison were very, very good. And I thought they were good because they give you a good representation on what mental illness is for a lot of people and why a lot of criminals commit the acts that they do. This is very reminiscent to something that I think you would see in Arkham Asylum, where you have all the inmates and you're trying to come to a verdict on what their mental health has done to them, and also come to a verdict on what kind of mental illness they may have. So these were really good segments because Malcolm Long, he's not a bad person. He seems like he has good intent, but also he does psychiatry as a job. And I think this is a big thing in the mental health world is I think a lot of us, even myself, would think or used to think that a lot of experts, one, thought they knew it all, two, they knew everything about us, and three, that they only did it to just make money. I get it. In the world, you have to make money, but when you are somebody that's suffering and you believe that someone's only trying to talk to you and prescribe you medications and give you this assistance for financially motivated reasons, you get a little bit annoyed by that. So I thought the segments were very, very well done. And one of the things I have in my notes too is from Watchmen 6, actually. And we can see when Rorschach's in prison, somebody starts taunting him. He dumps the hot oil over them, and then he starts losing it. Guards are holding him, and he's like, "You're locked in here with me. I'm not locked in here with you." And that's also true because then when the other inmates go to his cell, they unfortunately pay the consequences. He ends up smashing one off the toilet. Their head gets hit, and then eventually this gets him out to go with the Night Owl, who is really going out with Laurie, even though the Night Owl is one of, if not the most human character in this entire story, which also shows him being flawed too, even though he is a very, very good character itself. And the original Night Owl story is also very intriguing, but I might have to do a part 2 on that because I don't want this video to go too long. But also, I thought keeping a distance between Rorschach and Walter Kovac was really good because they're really pretty much the same person. It's just he wears a mask. But also the Keene Act, it has basically banned vigilantes, which means there's no masks. You can't go out and do what a typical vigilante does. And I think this weighs on Rorschach because you can see when the cops eventually get him, you can see how there's almost a sense of panic there, not because he's afraid of going to prison, but because he can't do what he needs to do mentally, and that's let loose. So Rorschach, being a vigilante, allows him to let loose and fill that proverbial void that he doesn't have in his day-to-day life, which again derives from abuse as a child, and also probably genetics too. But you can see when his mother is engaging in sexual activity to make money, and he interrupts, she takes it out on him and basically, says stuff about being an abortion, and things like that, and probably wanting that abortion, which means that Rorschach would have never been born. So that weighs on a child, and when you're a child, your cognitive process is different. So even when you're an adult, you still retain those memories and still feel like a child when those memories come up, which is very traumatic. So that's where I think there's a great sense of realism in Alan Moore's writing and a great sense of realism in this story itself. And one of the other things I like too is Malcolm. Malcolm says this. He says, "Society's grim elements have shaped him into something grimmer, something even worse." So this is, again, I think, a judgment on how mental health was years and years ago, where because somebody does more heinous acts, we consider them to be a worse individual without looking at the constituents behind those actions. It doesn't justify those actions, but it doesn't look at the bigger picture. And I think that's something that Alan Moore targets with this specific scene. So I like that sense of realism too. I think that really works. And the scene where he kills the German shepherds because the predator killed Blair, the really young 6-year-old girl, and fed her to her German shepherds was um, it wasn't just vindicating, but it was a barbaric way of getting vengeance, but it also probably felt good for the reader too. You don't want to see, a dog die, and you don't want to see a kid die, but um, for how barbaric the scene was, I think that Alan Moore making the scene with Rorschach even more barbaric, or just as barbaric, it matches a theme of violence that I think is very difficult to encapsulate. But I think what it does is it gives a sense of satisfaction, but that you can never replace somebody dying. But it gives a decent amount of satisfaction to say, you know what, that guy got what he deserved, and even those dogs, even though the dogs didn't really know what happened, they were just given meat and they ate it. It's in their nature. Um, they were still basically perpetrators in this story to the death of this young innocent 6-year-old girl. So that was very dark, and very brooding and very deep. But again, it's that uncomfortable realism that Alan Moore always portrays in his stuff, and you can even see it in V for Vendetta. It's a very uncomfortable realism with fascism that he digs into, and somebody needs to even the score, and that's what Rorschach is in this. To me, Rorschach is almost the V of the Watchmen, because he tries to settle scores in any single solitary way that he can. So that's pretty much my analysis on Watchmen from a literary point of view. I thought this was one of the best comics of all time. I have this and V for Vendetta in my top 5, which is crazy because they're both Alan Moore stories, but they both send realistic messages that I think most people, if not everybody, should try to understand and read. Because I would read these both. But the one thing I would say is take your time with them, because they're very dense reads. There's a lot going on, and you might even want to read it a second time, because I might even make a part 2 of this analysis, like I said earlier. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any other interpretations. I highly recommend it. I would definitely try to read 1 or 2 issues a day, because there is a lot of prose. So I would say take your time with it, register what you're reading, and then get back to it. This is one I would not blitz through, or binge, as people would say today. But take your time with it, because you'll really enjoy the story, and it's still actually reminiscent of a lot of things that are going on in our world today. In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. I have put some of my wrestling matches on this channel as well. So I put some clips up. I put some shorts. I was away for a few days, and I went to a local comic shop, and I found a lot of really, really cool stuff that I'm going to probably post in shorts, because I think doing a pickup video would be too long and probably a little bit too boring. So I'm going to put them in shorts, and you can see what I picked up. In the meantime, I probably will do a second channel at some point. I just want to get the subscription numbers and the watch hours up on this channel, because what I'm trying to do is get 500 real subscribers and get to 3,000 watch hours, so then I can become a YouTube partner and put out more and better content for you. So in the meantime, read The Watchmen, watch The Watchmen if you want, and I will see you soon.